Hello and welcome to the Pirates Round. In this video, unboxing, preparing the hull, and painting the Tartana from Firelock Games Blood and Plunder. Now the first thing you're going to want to do is pull the hull out of the box. You'll see it comes wrapped in this nice paper. And opening it up, there is the rigging kit, which is full of the wooden parts and resin parts, as well as the masts and spars there, the wooden dowels tied up with a rubber band. And the first thing you're going to want to do when you take this hull out of the box is check it over for any sort of mars or bubble markings or any imperfections in the hull that's the result of the resin casting process. Usually small ships like this don't have any problems. The quality control over at Firelock is generally pretty good. I haven't really heard of that many times people having to send their hulls back because of imperfections in the cast. Next, we're going to start opening up these cannon ports. There are 4 cannon ports on the Tartana, and we're going to cut away the flash using a hobby knife. And please do cut safely here. Go slow and make sure you're cutting in a safe manner. The goal here is not to get a perfect cut right away. We are going to later on use our knife to carve out the rest of the gun port. We're just trying to remove the flash here. And this on this Tartana, the flash was pretty thick, so I had to use quite a bit of force relative to some other operations I'm going to be doing on this hull before we get to the painting process. Now the Tartana also has this interesting ribbed bow. So there's a lot of flash between those segments as well. So we're going to cut those away in a safe manner. We're going to brace the hull against the desk and just cut from the top down. A little bit easier than the cannon ports, I must admit. But yeah, it's good to check over the entire hull, look for all the flash you can, and cut it off with a hobby knife. Just go, like I said before, go slow. Make sure you're not digging into the actual sculpt so that you're getting only flash when you do your cutting process. Now you can see here the gun ports are not quite square. There's still some flash left on the inside, so we're going to go in and carefully, and I continue to stress carefully, scrape those sides of the gun ports, the inside of the gun port, scrape those clean, make that shape a little bit more square. You can see the flash was intruding on the actual opening of the gun port, and so we're just going to take that knife, scrape it around the edge, and again, I'll continue to stress safety here. And you can see that the flash has been removed successfully, thankfully in one pass. But we are not done yet. We are going to file the inside of the gun ports, and here on the screen, I do this extra step. Sometimes it's not required, but it's good to test if the hull sits flat, and if it doesn't sit quite flat, you can scrape the excess flash from the edges of the hull. I would be very careful with this process. As you can see, I'm just gently scraping a little bit of flash off the corner there, but don't go overboard. You might cut into the actual sculpt. Okay, next we've got our file, and this file is going to be filing the insides of the gun ports as well as the ribbed areas on the Tartana because of that unique bow structure with the various ribs joining the bowsprit. So we're going to carefully file down using the flat edge. We're trying to get close to a square. We don't need to be a perfect square. The Tartana is kind of a curved hull shape in the back on the stern. So we're going to just go for as clean as possible. They're not perfect squares, which is completely okay, but we want to get flat enough so that when we glue the gun ports on later, that we have a nice even surface to do that on. And this is just footage of me filing the ribbing. Got to get in there to those tight spaces and just file it down. Make it as smooth as possible so that there's no extra flash hanging off the ribbing of the wooden bow there. Okay, so with the gun ports fully sanded and the ribs filed to my satisfaction, we're going to call the Tartana hull prepared for painting. And before we paint, we're going to give the hull a bath in warm soapy water. That way it'll get rid of all the dust we've accumulated, all of the maybe little bits of flash that are hidden that we didn't see, but it will help us make sure we get a nice clean paint job going into our first layer of paint, which is going to be this multi-surface black satin paint. It is craft paint from Folk Art. You could use a spray can of black paint, but if you're painting on a budget, craft paint works just fine for this application. We don't need to use the more expensive primers and paints for miniatures at this stage. So we're going to go all the way around the hull with this black paint. It's important that you investigate and go from multiple angles, looking for any white spots or anything that you missed. This first layer is going to set down the darkest color, give the crevices of the ship, the deep recesses of the wooden paneling, that nice black lining, so we don't have to go back in necessarily with a wash all over later that then dulls the colors that we've put down earlier. We rely on the undercoat to give us the dark recessed areas. And make sure you get everything: the bow, the interior of the ship, the deck, any of those little crevices. I find personally that using a large brush like this, the underside of the railing is usually a tough spot. So make sure to investigate that and look closely under good lighting to ensure that you've got full coverage of the black paint before we move on to the next step. And before we move on, I want to give a huge shout out to Dexter Hyde and the Plunder Den. Go check out the Plunder Den YouTube channel for all kinds of great paint advice and painting projects that Dexter has done for the game of Blood and Plunder. Dexter is an amazing commission painter, and he is the inspiration for this method of painting the Tartana hull that we're doing today. And I have stolen many of his techniques. Good artists steal, I guess, but again, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery that mediocrity can pay to greatness. So yeah, go check out Dexter, and huge credit to him for getting me started on painting Blood and Plunder ships. Okay, the next step is taking a dark brown color. This is real brown from Folk Art, and we're going to dry brush heavily over this black first layer that we've put down. This is going to be again, just another kind of undercoat layer. Compared to some later coats, this brush will be relatively wet, but what we're going to do is make sure we don't get any brown paint in the deepest recesses. We want to make sure to leave those recesses dark black as possible. That way we get the variation in color that we're looking for from dark to light. And then basically the process, to sum it up in a few words, is building up successive layers of paint from dark to light. And we'll paint up this bow area. We're going to paint the inside, the deck, just all over dry brush of this brown paint. Not being too careful yet. Next up, we'll take a lighter brown. This is bark brown, to give us our basic wood color. This is going to be the color of the actual wood that we're using in the construction of the ship. You can do any kind of medium brown here. This one has a little bit of, I guess, a chocolate color. But there's lots of types you can do, and I think the thing I've learned from doing this process is that when you go to choose your colors, you kind of have to think about the gradient, and you have to think about the way that the dry brush leaves a little bit of transparency behind. You don't want to go full opaque. You want to be able to see the layer underneath a little bit when you dry brush the lighter color on top. And so this medium brown is just going to be like the basic wood color. It's going to be like the color of the wood before it gets aged by the sun. And you're going to go all over the ship again, building up that color. trying to make sure it's about as even as possible. You can leave a few streaks or irregularities in the wood. You know, nothing is uniform when it comes to organic material. There's very little uniform stuff. One thing I'll say is that we're trying to leave shadows in the corners as much as we can. We're not trying to, in this case, we're not trying to fully cover up the layer of brown we put before this. We're trying to, again, get that transparency going with the dry brush technique and not go full opaque with a heavy wet brush. The touch of the brush should be a little bit lighter as well. The more bright your color, the lighter the touch should be, is something that I've learned over the course of painting. So hopefully that will be a helpful tip going forward in this project and in all your other projects. Okay, next we're going to start using this orange brown. It's called Pueblo. This color is very bright compared to the medium brown, so we're going to have to be extra careful to make sure we have the right amount of paint on the brush and make sure that we make sure both sides of the brush are evenly dry. Something that can catch you off guard when you're dry brushing is that one side of the brush may be dry, but the other side of the brush might still be loaded. And so when you run out of paint on the one side, there's a temptation to flip the brush over onto this very wet side, and when you do that, that's going to leave streaks behind because the paint was too heavy. So you're going to want to make sure both sides of the brush are dry enough to lightly apply this orange color, and it's really, really easy to go overboard by not managing the amount of paint on the brush correctly. So go ahead and just double check. Again, go slow. Just build up this layer slowly. You're going to want to use a fairly light touch with your brush when you go in and start to build up this color. But this definitely gives the highlight to the wood color that we're going to be using. Once we've got the Pueblo applied everywhere, you're going to see that the wood is kind of in that new color state. This is like a ship that just got built. And then we're going to work on aging the color up with a tan color in the next step. But again, just be careful with the amount you build up. Make sure it's fairly even. Try to get the highs where they should be. When I say that, like the highs are going to be where the light is striking the ship. We're going to leave the shadows in the corners. You don't have to push this paint into the corners. The shadows are going to start becoming more and more apparent as we get into the brighter colors. Okay, now for our fourth color, which is going to be Camel. This could be any tan that you like. Camel is a nice medium tan. It's not too bright, but it's bright enough against this brown to give us the impression that the wood has aged in the sun. Elwood kind of bleaches like this, and as the more it ages, it'll go gray. It'll lose its kind of orange color, go gray, and then go tan once it's been bleached in the sun. So that's why this Camel dry brush seems to work so well, in my opinion. You're going to want to go all over the hull with this, and again, be careful about the amount of paint on the brush. This can get even streakier and even more messy than the Pueblo can if you mess up. And actually, you'll see in a minute here that I did mess up on the interior, and I went a little bit overboard on the inside, and I had some streaking going. I had some issues there. So I just continued to work the paint up to the level that I wanted it at, and I did have to brighten the hull to match, but that's okay. It seemed to work out in the end, despite making that mistake. And I think that's part of a skill that one learns with painting projects, is that, you know, you make a mistake and you try to like adapt it into the rest of the project and make something good out of it. And I'll just say again, one of the tricks here is not to push this paint into the corners. We're trying to leave the corners slightly darker than the main part of the panel. And that's true as we get towards any of the edges of the sculpture. So the edges of the sculpture need to be dark, because that creates a separation visually. It makes the ship look more three-dimensional to the eye. Now how do you say, well, it's a three-dimensional ship? Of course it looks three-dimensional. Well, our eyes, when we look at stuff, it flattens out sometimes color-wise, and so we need a little bit of distinction between the values to give us that three-dimensional look and really exacerbate the change in shape between, say, like the ribbed panels on the side here, or the interior ribs of the ship, or even the deck hatch, the edges of the hatch versus the main deck of the ship. We're going to keep those shadows active. We're not going to paint over them. And eventually we're going to accentuate them with shade and make those shadows even darker, pushing the contrast even further. Now at this point I decided to paint the gunwales and the railings of the ship. Those are basically the all those upper areas. And my client, who I'm doing this painting for, wanted a sort of dark cherry color on the railing, and I may have gone a little too red with it. I know that cherry wood only stains red. It doesn't actually push into a red that's this red without staining, but that's okay. We're not exactly going for perfect realism with the boat. So I went ahead and mixed a dark red, I think it's called burnt red from Pro Acryl, and a dark umber as well from Pro Acryl, and made this kind of dark cherry color, and painted it all over the gunwales and just picked out all those raised areas. And that kind of gives us an impression of what the ship will look like in its final state. We're going to eventually shade down the edges again, just increasing that separation like I talked about earlier. But this is just a matter of picking out the raised areas, being neat and clean, trying to use the edge of the brush as opposed to the tip of the brush to pick out these raised areas alongside the hull. So we'll continue with that process, and then we'll get to shading the actual wood again. Okay, so next we take our Army Painter Dark Tone, and we're going to use this to increase the shadows everywhere there is either a natural shadow occurring, so that would be like the underside of the railings, the part where the deck steps down, or we're going to use it to accentuate separation between parts of the sculpt. So we're going to maybe put some shadow alongside the sides of the railings. We're going to put it alongside the deck hatch. We're even going to trace around the holes where the masts will go, because again, that's more separation, just to increase the three-dimensionality of the painting overall. And this is another process. You just go all the way around the ship looking for spots you can put shade in. Definitely put shade also under the hinges of the rudder. I also use this shade to get some vague impression of water flowing out of the gun port, because maybe the gun port was flooded and there's water dripping out. So I used it to do a little streaking on the side of the boat there underneath the cannon port. Don't know if that's completely accurate, but I thought it looked good, so I just wanted to go ahead and do it. But again, just go all over the ship and try to find those shadowed areas and accentuate the shadows with this dark tone. Okay, now this is the fun part, the really fun part of the build. My client wanted a pattern on the stern, and so I just went in with some really, I kind of went rough with this. I went in with some painter's tape, and I painted the, just a stripe above the gun ports in red, and you see me here masking off the appropriate area. Again, this is a super rough masking job. I didn't do anything like cut the tape or anything like that. There's, in fact, I do Gundam modeling, and so if there's a Gundam that I need to do a tiny piece of masking tape on, I have a board that I can use to cut like down to the millimeter what masking tape I use. But this is a super rough job with the masking tape, which is completely fine. Again, it's just to get a line and make the edge look neater than it normally would if I tried to freehand it. So taking this resplendent red from Army Painter and dry brushing on, or stippling on, I guess, some red paint, a red stripe, onto the back of the Tartana. Again, I'm using dry brush because I want that transparency. I don't want to go fully opaque. If I go fully opaque, I'm going to just obliterate all the underpainting that I did. So I don't want to do that. I want to instead get this like dry brush texture going on without covering up the underpainting. Then I took some more masking tape and I started to mask off some stripes for the yellow that I'm going to be using. So this is a Spanish ship. The colors of Spain are normally red and yellow. So we're going to use this red and yellow to make a stripe pattern on the back. And this is a very basic masking job. If I wanted a smaller stripe, I would like cut the tape in half, maybe do it that way. Not to say I couldn't paint over it and do it all over again. It's totally possible to do that, but I just wanted to use the tape here to get at least a slightly neater line. It's not a perfect system, again, because I overpaint the heck out of it, and there are occasionally some bleeds that happen with this masking tape, but that's okay. They can be neatened up later on, and we're actually going to see later on that I neatened it up with a small paintbrush. But this is the yellow that we're doing. I believe it's called Fiendish Yellow. There's a yellow that's slightly darker than this called Demigod Flames in the Army Painter range. But again, we're just trying to get that yellow on the boat and control the amount we're using. I was pretty liberal because I wanted this pattern to be bright. So in this case, I go for the more opaque. I don't go for as transparent as I was doing on the red. But the underpainting still shows through. Yellow is a pretty transparent paint. So you can see I'm also painting the railing on accident, and I do go and I clean that up later with more of the cherry red color. But you get the sense of what I'm doing here with the masking and painting the yellows in these gaps. And I tried to make it look even on both sides, just eyeballed it. Again, this is a pretty rough stripe, and I don't think that the painters necessarily in the 18th and 17th centuries were going to be as, machine perfect as, say, like a mecha paint would be in the far-flung future. And once that's dry, we're ready for the big reveal. We're going to peel this masking tape off and see what exactly happened with the paint. And there we go. I think that pattern came out pretty nice. As you can see, there's overpaint. So we're going to take a minute here with some black, and we're going to go back in, blacken that cherry red for the gunwales. We're going to go back in and fix the mistakes that were made with this patterning. I got some red on the gunwales. I got some yellow inside the recessed areas, which I needed to go back over with a very tiny brush in black to fix. But I think overall the pattern came out nicely. Did get some yellow on the hinges there. That's okay. All fixable, and I highly recommend you try something like this. Just basic masking and pattern making on your boats to give them a little bit more flavor. That's pretty nice, I think. And now for the final step in this video, I go ahead and pick out the hinges with a dark silver from Pro Acryl. Then later on, I shade that up with dark tone, make it look kind of messy, make it look a little bit oily, a little bit worn. The ship is got that lived-in quality. It's not a fresh ship with a shiny new metal hinge. So I might use some technical paint on this later, maybe like Typhus Corrosion from Citadel, to give it a rusty appearance or give it a slightly corroded appearance. I didn't want to go for like the orange rust because I think it would stand out too much against the hull. But it's just a choice I made not to compete with the brightness of the camel and the brightness of the pattern nearby. So again, a lot of this is just, choices that you make. This is not, of course, the only way to paint a Blood and Plunder ship. It's just a really good way, I think, to paint one. And yeah, that's going to conclude the Tartana paint job for now. And thanks for watching this video. Hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching all the way to the end. Like and subscribe. Hit the ship's bell so that you can get notified for new video content on Pirates Round. And we'll see you next time. Thanks.